So good evening to Tarot, and I think good morning to you. Is that
Yep,
correct? Okay,
that's right. Yeah.
that's right. So it's 9 a.m. on your side.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so first interview of the day. Okay, okay, Nick, let's start. So last time we met at Gamescom 2023, where I was able
Yeah.
to test Path of Exile 2 for the first time. Do you have any exciting new features you want to share besides the new class announcements?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge amount of change. Just we've been doing a lot of playtesting between Gamescom and now, and a lot of those things have just revealed a lot of changes that we need to make. So, I mean, we changed how the flask system works. We've changed like itemization quite a lot. I mean, there's all sorts of things, but yeah, it's without a specific area. Honestly, it's hard to even go into
Hmm?
like one specific thing that might have changed. We've changed like things about how the skill system works. We've changed yeah, it's kind of like almost nothing that you could even talk about hasn't received some kind of update or something like that to kind of like make things better.
Keep, yeah, perfect. We'll go in more details. I hope the next one will be a very short one, but I needed to ask, do you have any plans to modify the price model for Path of Exile 2, like monetizing other parts of the game?
So we're just keeping exactly the same monetization as Path of Exile 1. There's really
Okay.
nothing else to do. So as people might be aware, we're allowing people to transfer their microtransactions from one game to the other. I mean, it's not really transfer. In fact, like they're just available in both games. Like the whole time because the store is just considered the same. Like the stash is just the same stash, right? You can just see it in both games. You can equip it from both games.
So yeah,
Right.
this is so no pay to win elements, so just
Right.
cosmetics. Yeah, okay,
It's
perfect.
exactly the same as how it is in PoE1.
Okay, perfect.
So, hi Jonathan, by the way. I'm
Hey.
I'm Tharid. So that's a perfect leeway actually into the next question because we were hoping that this would be a rather short one, right? So you mentioned that every player will keep their bought items or
Mhm.
like stash and MTX and whatnot in PoE2. So what about, for example, a Delve stash, right? Because we won't know if Delve will be a thing in Path of Exile 2. Will there be some kind of compensation, or is your stance more like this game mode or this league mechanic doesn't exist in Path of Exile 2, so the MTX won't exist or the stash tab won't
Yeah,
exist?
it's basically like that. If there's no if whatever it is isn't carrying on into Path of Exile 2, there's just no need for it. But that being said, so like not that I want to commit to one way or the other about any particular league, but if we did add Delve in the future to Path of Exile 2, then we'd then at that point would just enable that stash because it's working. I mean, there's a few things like
Oh,
this, right? Like there are obviously like skill effects. There's certain skills that just aren't in PoE 2. It doesn't make sense for them to,
Yeah, that would have been my next question,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see them in the stash. Like it'll still be there as an object. It's just that
Mhm.
it'll just say, there's nothing compatible with this in this game, so therefore you can't use it. And I don't see any real issue with that. Like the main thing that we're trying to really do here is to make it so that you don't have any particular reason to feel like bad about playing both games at the same time. One thing I think some games have had in the past, and like this is going way back. Like there's been various MMOs and so on that have had sequels. Is that they release their sequel, people play it for whatever reason, they then don't really want to go back to the original again, and so you kind of get this thing where like the original game dies more, and we kind of want to avoid that. So we think a good way to do that is to make sure that the stuff that that if you do purchase anything, you can feel like that you're contributing to both games regardless.
So that basically also translates to, because you were mentioning like skill MTX and stuff like that. Like for example, if a skill changes from the visual side of things, right?
Right.
Does that also mean that the MTX will change accordingly and that people will be able to use that MTX? Or will there be some like
Honestly,
deactivated MTX stuff?
it's honestly really hard to know because like we haven't kind of gone
Yes.
through and looked at every case like that. It comes down to like I can't necessarily say anything about any particular skill. Like, if the skills change so drastically that the MTX doesn't make sense anymore, then like it kind of can't really work. So I guess we just have to really look at it case by case and just be like, okay,
Right.
like the skill's basically the same. Like, there's no reason we can't just use the effect that looks exactly like how when you bought it. For this one, it works okay. In some other case, it might be like, well, the mechanics have changed enough here that in order to make this work, we would have to like add a bunch more stuff. And like that is kind of not the intention. Like, we're not really wanting to go back and like remake everything we made in the past. It's more of a thing of just like where we can preserve compatibility, we'll just do it because we can. If we can't preserve compatibility, then we'll just say, okay, well the skill's changed enough that it doesn't really work anymore.
Okay. So compatibility is basically the mantra you're going for.
Yeah, exactly.
In that regard.
We want, and so for things like armor sets, like there's really no reason that we can't have all of that stuff just work. Like an armor's an armor, you put it on,
Exactly.
or generally speaking, the mechanics on them as well are kind of things where it will just work. So that kind of stuff is fine. It's worth mentioning, like, we use the same engine as Path of Exile 1 ultimately. Like, there's been lots of features added, but all of the Path of Exile 1 content is compatible with Path of Exile 2. So for that reason, it's very easy for us to have things work in both games. There's like very little preventing us. Like, in fact, even in Path of Exile 1 in Path of Exile 2 right now, we haven't like removed the Path of Exile 1 content from it. Like, you can just teleport with cheats, obviously, in our dev build, like into Path of Exile 1 areas with your Path of Exile 2 character, and it works. It's just that
okay.
there's a few things that are kind of a bit broken about it, like the camera perspective has changed and a few other things like that, so you tend to get a few issues, but like it's generally compatible, so we can easily move content from one to the other pretty easily.
Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, thanks. So, now we have the gold question. At the Gamescom, you showed me the new gold system, and it seemed like it was only important for the early game. So, for the early part of the game, did you change something?
So there's been a couple of things since then, actually, because what we've found is that gold is a really valuable tool to be able to use for a few features where we want to make sure that there are limitations in place, but we want to kind of ease up from what we had in Path of Exile 1. So a great example of that is respecking, where respecking is done with gold now. It makes it so that like we can make it easier at the start of the game and then more expensive later on in the game and this kind of thing. Like there's stuff like that that's really easy to do. And the other one is trade. We're not going to, gold isn't a currency that you can trade between players, but what we are going to use it to do is to facilitate to use it as effectively a sync currency that can be used for doing instant buyout trading between players. So effectively right now in Path of Exile 1, you always have to have the other person has to be online. You have to like manually do the trade with that person. In Path of Exile 2, we are planning on having it so that you can have instant buyouts, but the currency that has to be paid for that. So like basically there'll be like the price that the other player sets, and then there'll also be like an automatically determined gold price that's like effectively destroyed when the person does the buyout. So the player gets the like chaos orbs or whatever, and the system destroys the gold. And so effectively gold is just a really useful way, because it's bound to your character and can't be traded. It works as a way to prevent basically high frequency trading occurring, where things are, like where the economy can kind of go out of whack. So we can effectively use gold in that way, and I think that will probably be the primary use of gold in endgame. And so we effectively have to work out how many trades can you do per map that you run, kind of thing, and like balance that in like a certain way to make sure that everything works out. So that's one really useful thing. But even honestly, just through the game, like having done a lot more playtesting now than what we had done back at Gamescom, I'm definitely very happy with where gold is in the economy playing through the game. A really important thing about it is that it serves as a catch-up mechanic in a way for players, because obviously when you have a random item system, you could get lucky, you could get unlucky. There's all sorts of things that can happen. But what gold is effectively a way to control what drops you get, because like when you get gold, it's effectively a voucher for get any kind of item that you want from the shops. So we've made shops a lot more useful. Like we've made them way better. And then you can buy things to like fix whatever deficiency it was that you have because you didn't find the items you needed to find. So in that way, it serves as a really good catch-up mechanic. Like if you've got a bad weapon, then you can fix that problem with your gold. If you have bad defense, you can fix that problem with your gold. Like whatever it is your character needs, gold can help you with that issue. So we found it really useful from that perspective, just as effectively a catch-up mechanic. Which
Will I need to farm gold separately, or is it collected?
No. It's balanced basically so that like you get enough of it to sort of fix your problem, and effectively we can control the degree to which we can improve things with regard to the to the catch-up mechanic by effectively changing how much gold that we're giving out. So we've kind of adjusted that and tweaked it quite a few times, and we've kind of got it to a point now where I think that the it's sort of working out. So that's actually been really successful, and honestly, I wish we had gold in PoE1. I think it would have solved various problems that we had at the time.
you were honestly like mentioning like two of the very core issues for me personally in PoE1, which one is the trading issue. So you were saying that I don't know if this is like brand new information, but you were saying that gold can be used to basically insta buy out stuff from other players. That means that the system is in place where you can look this item up on a website, and then you just say, okay, I want to buy this, and then it's in your stash, or how does that work?
So the way that I mean, we haven't actually talked about the entire details about that, but ultimately something like that. There's like a couple of things about it to make it feel a little bit less like you're just like
Right.
purchasing from a database. But ultimately, yes, you don't need to involve another player to be able to buy an item off them in
Okay.
PoE2. And we also have for currency, we even have like a more market-like thing, with buy and sell orders and things like that. That because currency is kind of a bit of a special case since you buy it in bulk. We wanted to make that experience a little bit better, even better than that. So.
But normal player trading is still existing.
Oh yeah, of course.
Right?
You can still do the
Okay.
old trade system is still there. You can do whatever you like. Like if you want to just use the old way, then that's fine. But I suspect a lot of people will move to the kind of instant buyout type trading system just because.
Because they don't have to
Yeah.
wait for the player or to be online.
For buyers, for buyers, the experience is a lot better. That's why I suspect
that makes sense.
people will move to that.
So you were also mentioning that that items on vendors and NPCs are going to be much better. So because we are from the Diablo space, right? We had this discussion in Diablo 4 as well lately, when trading was enabled for more item types, legendaries, and even unique items. And what also happened is that at the gambling vendor, you can now basically get the best items in the game from gambling, like it was back in Diablo 2 as well. So can you get with gold, of course, or like you can also buy stuff with other currency, I suppose. But can you get, in theory, like maybe not the best item, but a very good item at an NPC compared to PoE1, or is that not an option?
So with gambling in particular, in fact, with both the shop and gambling, there's no limitation on what gambling can give you. Like it's the same drop rules as the regular drop system, except for that gambling has a very significant increase to the chances of magic and rare and unique are hard coded for gambling. But in terms of the generation of like what mods it can have and all of that stuff is allowed. The thing, of course, that you won't get from gambling is stuff which are drops that are like only from a certain boss or something like that. Like
okay, boss
if a
drops.
boss has a specific boss only unique, then
So you
obviously
have
gambling
different loot tables.
Yeah, so there are like loot tables for the specific things, but like in terms of like anything that you could get from a regular monster that you killed, you could get from gambling. Like that's the same system, and we try to make sure that the sort of general loot table, as it were, has got like lots of good stuff in it. Like you want the feeling that you could just kill the next monster and that it could drop an amazing item. Like that's kind of important. You do need that mix, but ultimately, yeah, anything that you would get from regular monster, you get from gambling too.
Okay, perfect. So speaking of Gamescom, will GGG be at Gamescom this year? Maybe with the opportunity to play the current build like it was last year?
That is the plan. We're going to be at Gamescom. If anyone wants to try it out, then feel free to come and we'll
So
have
I can play the Witch there?
The Witch, you should be able to. Yes, I believe you will be able to play the Witch. Yeah.
Perfect. So
Nice.
I'm happy. So Towet, take it.
Yeah, perfect segue again, because you just, I think last week it was, right? You released the Witch gameplay showcase on YouTube. For every basically Witch and spellcaster, I would absolutely recommend watching this, because for me personally, it left a very warm feeling in my heart, because I love necromancers in basically ARPGs and MMOs as well. And it's really like, I know it was a Witch showcase, but I immediately obviously thought of the Necromancer fantasy, and we are not fully aware of all the ascendancies that will be in PoE2, but it really felt like it transported the Necromancer vibe very well. Your minions had like this big focus on being useful and being like easily resurrectable and also easily modifiable and whatnot. So are there, like, especially compared to PoE1, were there like any particular design choices you and the team have made to support that particular playstyle that basically says, okay, my minions deal a lot of damage and I only play the supporting role, because in PoE 1 and in other ARPGs as well, of course, you have this minion commander in the back kind of playstyle that doesn't involve a whole lot of clicking and skill shots and whatever. But there's also this issue that this can become too powerful for too little effort, quote unquote. So did you do something different compared to PoE 1, for example, where the Necro obviously was, or the Necro Ascendancy obviously still is, like one of the most popular ascendancies and is basically the most popular playstyle on average, I would say.
So the Witch has been one of the hardest classes to design, actually, to sort of be able to improve. We iterated so many times on different possible variations and so on. But the main, like, okay, so we have the other issue that we've had with it, and we found this even after the announcement and just during some playtesting that we've been doing, is that there's this kind of knife's edge of balance with minions, where like it's so easy for it to tip over into like this just absolutely destroys bosses and you don't have to think of it or do anything, versus like my minions feel like they're dying instantly and like it just doesn't feel fun. So this has been a real knife's edge to go on. And I think fundamentally one of the issues is that the minions are mostly single target DPS, and so it's just that they're spread out over many things. If you have a boss, then every single minion will be attacking it, so you get really high DPS.
Is there a
but then when
limit?
you have what was that? Sorry.
Is there a limit?
On the number of minions you can get?
Yeah.
I mean, there are various ways to limit. So the main limitation is spirit. So you have a spirit bar, and then you can allocate minions from that, and then the general sort of number that we expect you to get by endgame is kind of like roughly 20 permanent minions. But you can have temporary minions as well, and those minions, generally speaking, will come from corpses. So that's kind of the limitation for those ones. Though they do have upper bounds as well to get it getting too crazy. But we're talking like you can have like an extra 20 temporary minions kind of thing. Like it's a lot. You get like a screen covered and stuff. But as I was saying, effectively minions are single target DPS. It's just spread over many entities. So yeah, when they're focusing on a boss, all of that damage that they have goes into that boss. Whereas when you're clearing, it's spread out over a large number of monsters, and so this actually presents like a sort of inherent, very tricky balance conundrum, because you need to effectively have more total damage while clearing than you do during a boss fight. So the distinction between temporary and permanent minions is actually helping to aid that, because like during a boss fight where you don't have corpses, I mean, you do have corpses sometimes because there's ad phase and so on, but not every boss has them, and we wouldn't want to, and we're specifically not going to add a mechanic that will allow you to create new corpses. So during bosses, effectively that allows you to kind of give a more tactical kind of like the gameplay where like you have to we've got a few less things going on. You can pay attention to what the boss is doing. You can see what's occurring. This kind of thing can happen during boss gameplay. But then when you're clearing, there are lots of corpses available. You can create a lot more minions of the temporary kind. You get both the permanent and the temporary, and then now your DPS goes up effectively if you look at it across the entire crowd, and then your clearing efficiency is still good. So this was kind of a thing we arrived at eventually for sort of a way to get both of those. But even then, we've still had issues. So like recently, we were dealing with the fact that the difference between the damage that a boss does and the damage that regular monsters do is not actually as high as you might imagine. At the end of the day, both types of monsters have to be able to kill you. And so if a white monster did 25% of a boss, they just never would ever. They need to be like sort of substantial fractions. So then when you look at minion life, you've got a problem once again where it's like if you balance the minion life to be good for bosses, you'll end up in a situation where during clearing they just evaporate. So then we've had to do things like, and we actually eventually went all the way back to Diablo 2 for this solution. By the way, this is something I wasn't even aware of until recently. That in Diablo 2, minions take more damage from bosses than they do from regular white monsters. There's a bonus.
Correct, yeah.
And so basically by doing that, it means you can buff minion life so that during clearing they feel right. But then when you get to bosses, it also feels right as well. So this kind of thing is like the kind of tweaking you need to do. And even the other thing we found is even just down to the individual monster level, like you really have to consider every single skill and like, okay, what damage should this do to minions is actually a separate thing to think about. Because unlike a player, a minion is not going to dodge. Like you can do limited, like we do have the ability to direct where your minions go, but if you're talking about something where it's like, the whole arena is like got stuff all over it, like it, you have to be really careful about skills like that because they can have big implications for minions. So there's a lot of very specific balance, even just for individual monsters. Like you kind of have to think about, you almost have to do like a minion balance pass through the whole game with all the monsters rebalanced, and again just for minions. It's quite a quite a thing.
You need one singular minion developer basically that has like a minion PhD and that basically solves these like n to 1 and n to n, and where 1 is the boss and n are the minions, and then you have n plus x, and x is the, because that I found that very interesting when you said that the temporary minions are basically the solution to increasing your minion throughput while clearing, but that is not possible when you don't have corpses, or when you can't create corpses that reliably during a boss fight. By the way, I actually wanted to ask, because I saw that during the boss fight video, or one of my friends actually did, and he was immediately asking, can boss abilities target minions? Because I mean, it looks that way in the video where we fight the skeleton boss as the witch in the showcase.
What we generally try to do is, if you've got things like basic melees and so on, we want those to target minions because it would look dumb if they didn't. But when we're talking about big abilities that kind of like where you're expected to kind of like pay attention and then dodge and this kind of thing, for those ones we want to make sure that they exclusively target the player, because otherwise, in fact, it can actually be a downside to target the minions with those kinds of things, because the abilities actually become less predictable when you can no longer understand like how it will go versus your movement. So for anything that's kind of like the big ability, you definitely need that to target players only. So effectively, if we get the balance of that right, and once again, it's another, just like every boss, we have to look at every ability and consider like what the targeting has to be just for minions and things like that. Like it's a whole thing for sure. So yeah, it's a class that like probably has an outsized amount of specific development compared to any other in some ways, but it is important because it is one of those fantasies that lots of people have and lots of people love. So we certainly wouldn't want to shortchange minion people with regard to development. But yeah, it's funny how it just has such a big effect on development.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand that, and even you in your second iteration of a complete game basically are going back to Diablo 2, where the whole necro fantasy actually comes from, right? Okay, you can talk about D&D and stuff, but like from actually playing the necromancer, it is that exact feeling, and it was actually quite well designed for back in the day, and that's why I immediately looked at all the different solutions in that gameplay trailer. Again, I advise everyone to look at this not only from a player perspective, but also from a design perspective, because you can immediately see that you have basically made nodes during PoE1 development, and now you're putting all these nodes into execution when we are seeing like the minions on the weapon, for example. I was like, my mind was blown, right? Because it's such an easy solution to not have a singular skill gem for skeletons, but to put it on a melee on a minion focused weapon as an inherent affix, or however you may call it. So these kind of solutions, they make a lot of sense, and they also they seem to feel right and feel good, even without me having played it. But I saw it, right, and it's very, and also the temporary minions. That's not a new thing exactly, right? Because skeletons existed in PoE1 as well.
But the thing with it was that there were periods during development where we didn't even have those, and it felt like something was missing. Like there was a moment we had to realize the fact that both types of minions are actually fun and useful and important. Like it's easy to this is another one thing of things that happens in development all the time, is it's very easy to look at a system, be like, okay, this is bad, we need to change it. Then you make a bunch of changes, you end up with something completely different, and then you realize that a lot of the things about the initial system that were actually good about it as well. And that happens quite a lot where, but I still think the exercise is valuable to like change something completely, then change it back, because you learn a lot just in the process of that. But it is definitely something that where we had to, like go through various things of going back to things we had before as well.
Did that happen very, very like regularly, that you had to do like a 180 on very big picture stuff, or did that happen a lot at the beginning of PoE2 design, or is that still something that is, because you are talking like it happened? Yeah. Or like it could have happened yesterday, and we are quote unquote very close to release, and like from a player perspective, I think like that's interesting. Yeah,
it absolutely still happens, and I mean, so an example of that happened very recently, like I'm talking like a week ago, is so we had it so that so this wasn't like a full 180, but it was more like coming moved life from the sorry yeah. So I was going to say this was
you were
something
cutting out.
where this was something where we came to something about an understanding about something that was important in Path of Exile 1. So we removed life from the tree in PoE 2, and the reason why we did that was because we didn't like it that we had a stat where everyone has to know to allocate it, and if you don't know that, you just die. And it's like, well, what choice? Like, it didn't really feel like a choice, because it's like, well, if you have to allocate this anyway, then like, what choice are you really making? Like, in theory, the passive tree is supposed to be about choices, not about just allocating things that you must allocate. So for that reason, we wanted to remove life from the passive tree. And what we figured was, okay, that's fine. We remove the life, but we also affect monster damage, which we have control over. So therefore, it shouldn't matter removing the life. It should just mean like it can be fine that it just comes from from items and so on. It's not really a big deal. Like it doesn't matter. But an effect that we didn't realize that we had lost was that so when you have armor. The armor doesn't work against elemental damage, right? So effectively, armor is a physical only protection. Now, what we effectively had gotten to the point was elemental damage had effectively become too strong relative to a character that wears only armor, because they weren't getting increases in life. Like the elemental damage has to scale up because it affects people who are using other defense types like energy shield and evasion. But then for the effect of the relative effect of what an elemental attack does to a warrior, to someone wearing entirely armor, had effectively gone up because of the fact that we'd removed life from the tree. So the existence of non-symmetrical defenses had effectively meant that like that role of life had gotten broken. So what we did to address that was we didn't just put life back on the tree. What we've actually done is we've massively increased the amount of life you get from strength. So that means that effectively, if you're an armor character, well, you're going to have lots of anyway.
Okay. You get it over strength.
Life. Exactly, you can create that. Now, the energy shield players don't have this problem, of course, because the energy shield is a symmetrical defense, except for chaos damage, but they've got specific balance for that. And then the evasion character is also asymmetrical with respect to elemental damage, because like they can evade anything regardless of what element it is. So this solution is effectively a targeted solution to improve something, but it took a long time to come to the realization of why was it that armor characters didn't feel tanky anymore, because we made that life change a very long time ago. It had seemed to be working, like, we didn't really have any problems, and we adjusted everything so in theory it was the same, but it was the sort of noticing of the fact that there had been a shift here, and then realizing this and then making that change that was kind of important. So that drastically affects the and then of course once you make a decision like that, you're like, okay, well now I have to look at the other attributes and make sure that they feel like they're getting us like good bonuses from them. We're increasing the money you get from int, and so on, like things like this we have to do as well. So it has all these repercussions that go out, but that particular thing about how that works was like something that was not obvious to us when we made the original change. We came to the realization of that, and then we can make some kind of adjustment. But that kind of thing, as I said, it happens all the time, still happening. It happens in response to playtesting, because during playtesting, you get exposed to a lot of obviously players who are not as good as what we have become, having played things over and over. And so something like defenses are exactly the kind of thing where it's hard to know without getting playtesting, because you can fix your defenses with play skill, right? If you know how to dodge, then you obviously your defenses don't matter as much. And so a thing like that, where we're having a problem with the tankiness, like wasn't as big of a problem for me personally, because like I've played against these monsters so many times, I know exactly what they do. I can easily dodge out of the way. But then once you throw more players at it who haven't been doing that, then you start to see, like, okay, we have a problem here. The characters are dying.
That's a very interesting solution, by the way, because we are coming from the very same alleyway in Diablo, because primary stats is also bound to defenses, right? Strength provides armor for barbarians, intelligence provides resistances for the sorcerer, and resistances were borked because there was quite a lot of discussion internally at Blizzard, but also stuff wasn't working, and Crip found out. He made a video and people were talking about it, and that's why Zorks were so bad. So, but I think that is a very similar problem, because it appears that the life change, which is a great an insane change, honestly, looking at the PoE meta that has evolved over the last 40 decades and 55 leagues, that you basically always have to keep in mind that you have to pick your life nodes and you have to pick your big life wheels and whatnot. And that going away like sounds very refreshing, but I can totally see that it could bring like a lot of very, very big issues along the way, like way later along the way in development, similar to, and maybe that was a similar case in the Diablo sphere, quote unquote, where it's not as complex in terms of defenses, I would say. But it's certainly also the case that a lot of people were complaining about defensive capabilities when other people were saying, well, you basically have to just use your dodge roll. So can we expect hitless runs in Path of Exile too, like we see on Elden Ring and stuff like that?
No,
can we
no,
go
don't
to the
ask
campaign?
this. Don't ask this. I get hit every time.
Sounds like a fun challenge.
No.
Well, for bosses, you can absolutely do that. For monsters, I don't think it's possible. There's just too many monsters, and there's too much going on with them. But yeah, for bosses, absolutely. Like generally speaking, boss mechanics are completely dodgeable. There should be nothing. There's basically nothing that always hits you. Yeah, like it's interesting in a way because sometimes it can seem like the boss gameplay and regular clearing gameplay are almost two different games in some ways. It's very different the type of design you need to do for them. So yeah, it is very interesting how that ends up. And there's also a lot more bosses in what I should say is during campaign there's a lot more bosses in PoE 2 than in PoE 1, and in particular we no longer have the kind of like there are lots of technically bosses in Path of Exile 1 that are just like some random guy who's just like some bandit who's like recolored or something, which is like completely a different universe to the type of bosses that we have in every area in PoE 2. So yeah, you end up with a lot more of that stuff, and so a lot of that design is like ultra important to get right. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting how that ends up, but I guess one of the things that is still like a point of concern for people is like the degree to which you need to pay attention even just during regular clearing. Like it still comes up even in the office, and it's a bit of a contentious issue even because some people are kind of like, I don't want to have to pay attention as I'm just clearing. I just want to be able to zone out and just kind of not even think. Other people are like, I just find that boring. I need to and I feel like I want more actively engaged, some sort of active gameplay. And it would be tempting even to just say, okay, well, you know what? We have some classes that play one way and we have some classes that play the other way. But then the problem is that the people who have an easy time are kind of like, well, it's unfair. Sorry, I should say the people who have a hard time and then feel it's unfair that you have other people who have an easy time. So this is definitely, once again, one of those knife edge issues of like, you have to get sort of this exactly right in order to get an experience where you both feel like you have to pay attention from time to time, but also that you're not like too... having to concentrate so hard every second that you get fatigued. So
that's actually a perfect segue into Jesse's next question, because when we are talking about possibilities and getting hit by stuff you can't see, I think the next question is very appropriate.
It's perfect for this. So seeing the game coming only to the new consoles, what system requirements should we expect for PC? Because it looks all amazing and it seems, we need a very good PC.
So you should be fine with any kind of like 10 series card or above on the Nvidia, to look at the Nvidia side. You should be fine.
Okay.
It won't be not necessarily at the highest resolutions, of course, but you should be okay. At the moment, we're having a little bit of trouble with CPU side stuff, which we're working on. We're hoping we can improve that a little bit, but it should be okay. It's in some ways our engine is a lot more traditional, and I mean going back like a long way than a lot of other engines. This is maybe getting into stuff that maybe I don't know if you have any understanding of, but we're what's called a forward renderer as opposed to a deferred renderer, and generally speaking, almost everything these days is a deferred renderer, and as a top-down game, I actually think that like having a more old school forward style renderer is actually an advantage for us, because we don't have to worry about having like these huge view distances and things like that. And so we don't have to worry about culling and like overdraw very much, which is the big thing that deferred renderers kind of get a lot better stuff. But what it means is then I think one of the reasons why our game looks particularly great is that a forward renderer has a lot of advantages when it comes to making transparent effects. And so I think that our effects work that we do is top notch, and it's a lot of what contributes to the feeling of the game looking really amazing. And it's something that, yeah, as I said, deferred renderers are not generally as good at. So that I think is an advantage here. But it also means that, yeah, the performance I think can scale a little bit more easily on the GPU side. I mean, as I said, I believe it should be fine on a sort of 10 series graphics card. But yeah, CPU, we're still working on a bit. I think there's more improvements we can make. What I'm hoping is that you'll be able to go down to a 9 series NVIDIA GPU. That would be a great target to be able to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have to be like 720p. That would have to be like 720p,
wow.
so on.
Yeah.
But we'll see how we end up there. But I believe that the technical minimum should be around that area. But yeah, as I said, we're still working on it. There's obviously a lot of optimization still to do, because optimization is one of the last things that you do during development.
And you also need some tests from beta players and a larger group of playing, so you get feedback. Okay. So maybe as a small follow-up question, any plans to bring Path of Exile 2 on Stream Deck? On this Steam Deck?
Yeah.
So
it is certainly one of the harder platforms to target. I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be possible. I think I've said this before, but effectively we just need to get one, test it out, like work out what settings we need to use and things like that. There's no real reason it can't happen. I mean, obviously we've got good controller support and everything like that. There should be no reason why we wouldn't have a good time there. It's really just making sure we're matching the hardware well. And I have a feeling that right now that it might be CPU side that's the more the issue there. Yeah, that would be the. We just need to sort that out.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Because it would be very. I don't want to say sad, because I'm a Steam Deck player. I became a dad earlier this year, so I was limited to the Steam Deck while watching the little one. So I really found a lot of fun in playing Diablo on the Steam Deck, which I didn't expect whatsoever, because I'm a PC gamer. I have played Diablo for my whole life on PC. Of course, I played Diablo 3 on consoles. It was a nice couch co-op experience. So that took me by surprise that you guys were actually going for couch co-op. And you were, or like the console director also said that you are going for, like, this is a possibility on PC as well, right? You can have this couch co-op between PC clients, right?
Well, so if you want to play like together on one machine, then yeah, you can use 2 controllers and play on PC and do that just fine. Of course, if you want to
okay.
Yeah, but if you want to just play co-op regular, I mean, just like Path of Exile 1, you can join a party and play. But of course, we also have cross-play so that you can play co-op between PC and a console as well. So like all variations that you can imagine here are basically supported. We can do whatever arrangement you like.
You have cross-play
cool
and cross-progress, so
yes, we do.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's cool, yeah, because it would be very sad if this experience and the development time that went into creating stuff for console, right, if that wouldn't hit Steam Deck eventually, because it's such a nice experience, and obviously I don't want to fight like Uber Elder on my Steam Deck while riding the train or something like that. Right. Maybe a cool challenge eventually, but yeah, that's why we were asking, because it definitely seems like the future, that more and more games become available across multiple platforms. Obviously, Diablo did a very great job at this, and yeah, I'm hoping that Path of Exile goes the same route, and it already does, right? After that console announcement, I think the community in general was very pleased, because I think there's quite not only a market, but there's actually quite a player base who wants to play ARPGs in like sort of a relaxed fashion. So talking about relaxed gameplay, are you first?
Yeah, no, and I'm not first, but I just want to throw one question in. Can we expect 4-player couch co-op? So out of that chat.
So we were thinking about this, but the problem is the user interface starts to get very crowded once you get to 4 players. So we decided to just go with 2 for the couch co-op. Um, Technically speaking, in the back end, it is actually supported, like because we thought we might be doing it, but then when it came to user interface design, it just became very clear that that would be very, very tricky.
It's for
So we ended
company
up
parties only. Okay. Yeah. That's
Okay, company only.
that's nice.
Okay, so
No, that would
sorry.
be. I couldn't imagine. Yeah. I mean, that's a cool question. But I think 4-player couch co-op, was that a thing in Diablo 3, Jesse? I can't
It
remember.
was a thing, but it's the
It was okay.
interface is little bit
Yeah. I mean,
easier.
that was a simpler time. Yeah.
Hmm.
But that would be a fun thing to implement one day, right?
All right.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, going back to what I was about to ask, talking about relaxed gaming, quote unquote. So when we watch like most of the gameplay showcased so far, we see that there's definitely like a change in pace and also like in tactical gameplay. So we see that there's basically much slower gaming, right? ARPG gaming happening in those Path of Exile 2 showcases. So, like a lot of class mechanics, for example, like the mercenary grenade system. This also seems to like actively promote this type of gameplay, right? So, how will abilities like the grenades or like necromancer skeletons who rise up slowly and stuff like that, how will this behave in super duper? I don't want to say the word with Z, right? The zoomy gameplay. How does that translate well into endgame? Because I keep having the awesome mercenary gameplay in mind, where the mercenary shoots the grenade, right? It's a very a fairly long animation, a super immersive animation, and then you have the trap timer, for example, or not. It's a grenade timer, right? And I see you have ways to decrease that delay, right? But will this be up to a point where you do this and then the grenade instantly explodes? Or how will that work? Because there has to be some sort of like pacing issue, right?
So effectively, what I want to try and avoid is a situation where the game becomes completely unreadable. Like you need to get to the point where like you want to feel like you're increasing in power, so it's very important that things get faster as you go towards endgame, but not like so crazy that you just don't even understand like what is going on anymore. So there are stats for basically everything as far as like that you might want to increase. Like they will. So I don't know if it's in the tree right now, but I'm almost certain there'll be grenade time reduction stat somewhere going on.
Okay.
Like the kind of thing that you need to be able to do. But yeah, the main thing is like, okay, in PoE 1, you kind of had this situation where it got so crazy, the scaling of speed in particular, to the point where you just don't know what's going on, and like you watch someone stream playing Path of Exile 1, and like you can't even like you look and you go, what the hell is even going on? Like what even is this game?
Cyclone.
Like it doesn't make any sense. So I think when people hear that, sometimes they assume that we want to go all the way to like complete just like I mean, okay, so there was like that game No Rest for the Wicked that came out recently, and that game is like very, much slower
Yes.
paced, right? And I think people worry that that's like kind of what we're talking about here, that like that's experience. Like it isn't that. It is still very much like a game where you can scale to crazy degrees, but like the degree to which you scale isn't going to be to the point where you literally cannot tell what's going on. One thing I think that is the thing there is just keeping a little bit better control over attack speed and cast speed. A lot of the issue comes down to that, and the other thing as well that we've found that we can do is you can make something slower, but yet make it not feel slower by improving a lot of the mechanics around movement and how you use things. So, for example, the witch and the sorceress, well, I mean, all players technically, like all spells now can be done while moving. And once you do that, it kind of like the amount of time it takes you between spells can be preserved while your cast speed goes down a lot because you get to move while doing it. If you have to like shoot, then move, then shoot as 3 separate actions, and this takes you like 2 seconds to do, versus like shoot and while moving the whole time, then in one scenario your attack speed can be like 1 attack per like over one takes 1 second, and versus when you can't move while shooting, it might have to be like 500 milliseconds. So immediately there you get to double the length of certain things while not actually feeling like the game slowed down. And so it's a lot of these tricks like this that we can do to kind of prevent this getting to this unreadable, horrible state, while still allowing for like it to feel like the gameplay is fast. So I think that it's really just a question of like experiencing that and seeing what you feel about it. Yeah, as I said, I kind of want the best of all worlds effectively, where the game is still readable, but yet you feel like you increased in power a lot, and then you get to the end and you feel like, oh, I'm totally broken. My character's insane. Like I can just clear stuff amazingly, while also not getting to the point where like someone else sees that gameplay and thinks this game looks stupid. I could never play it. This is kind of like the needle we're trying to thread here, hopefully, if we can do that, then we'll have something that can make everyone happy in this regard. But yeah, we'll just have to see how we go with that. It's also going to be just a little bit difficult talking about in-game balance because we can theorize as much as we want by projecting out exactly. I mean, like right now we could go to an in-game level area and we can set all the stats like how we believe they're going to be. But what we have found is that as we go through and do this pass finally here of really balancing the game properly for true feel, you work out like you balance Act 1 and it changes where you need to be in Act 2, and then you balance Act 2 and it changes where you need to be in Act 3, and like everything.
It's not a
linear
like, experience,
and then as soon as you have like until you've really finished the game and people can actually play it seriously, it's very hard to really know exactly what you'll get. So when we showed off the mercenary in particular, right? Like we didn't like the balance of that area is not truly the balance of that area. We kind of took a wild stab and just did something that would look good for the demo, but like by the time you actually get to that area, I can't exactly say what it will be like because it requires balancing everything before it.
And we remember that because that's super interesting because it actually looks different in gameplay and in difficulty compared to the other showcases, because I think you've done that maybe you've done that because you wanted to showcase the actual gameplay and the difficult, or not the difficulty, but the choice between moving and shooting and only shooting and only moving.
We want to make it clear. And it's funny with the Witch as well. Initially, we were going to do the demo in higher level areas to start, but when I actually tried to do that, I was just finding that like I wasn't able to communicate very effectively because like, if you build a giant minion ruckus yourself, like you understand what's going on, but in order to make the mechanics clear, I needed to go back down to like literally level 2. So level that I can demonstrate mechanics in an area where like you can actually understand what's going on initially.
That was, by the way, my first reaction when you were saying at the end of the video. So that was the part where it was level 2. Now we look at level 30 gameplay, and I was like, that can't be possible, right? Because you had like 8 minions at level 2, right? So that was you were very successful in showcasing what the witch is about, or what a minion focused witch is about, without destroying the illusion or like the immersion in that regard. That's very interesting.
So yeah, it's definitely one of those things, and I guess it just means that when sometimes it's worth remembering that when you see these gameplay demos, like so in the case of that level 2 witch though, that really was the balance. The only thing there is that one of the skills that you could get was actually from so the essence drain is not normally given to you that area. Like we pulled it down so that we could just demonstrate it there for that combo. But in terms of the balance, that is the balance of that area and how many minions you get and everything like that. Like that's all legit. But in some other demos we've done, it's like you end up like we want to show a different area, like something high level, and then the balance is somewhat fictional because, like as I said, we kind of hadn't got up to that point. So that was definitely true of the mercenary. Like I mean, it's hard to say exactly what it will look like, but like it's tuned effectively to be visually obvious what's going on and like this kind of stuff. So yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. So this obviously is like a design choice, but also maybe like a choice in difference to the earlier iteration of Path of Exile. So and we, by the way, we are using the term, or I use the term design space quite often because it very concisely describes what the goal behind a design decision most of the times is, right? It is to either create design space for other abilities, or to fill design space that has been created before. And I think I've heard it quite a lot from you as well, right? Because it's such a great word to fill in lots of meaning into it, right? So do you have like this one particular game design choice which opened the most design space for you? Because, for example, you were talking about the choice to remove life from the tree, right? Which is like, from a player perspective, is like insanely huge, right? Because when I look at the Path of Exile 1 tree, I see like 40 or to I don't know how many points for my free use, right, to increase my damage or my resistances or whatnot. So is there like over the last few years since Path of Exile 2 has been designed, is there like that one particular thing that opened like 40 doors at the same time for you?
So the big one absolutely is the change to how the skill gem system works. By having it so that everything can be a 6-link, by having effectively like not having to trade skills off against each other is very important, because it means that you can actually viably run many skills at the same time. And as soon as you can, once we can expect you to run many skills and like not just use one spamming all the time, like because you don't have, because they can all just be as powerful as each other, it immediately opens up the comboing kind of gameplay that we want. Like we can actually make it so that, yeah, like to get the best damage, you want to be using multiple skills together in interesting ways. So that change really just did a huge amount, and I've talked quite a lot about it. But yeah, like that change really is at the core of the design, the big design shift for Path of Exile 2, I would say. But I'll give you another little story that we recently had as well about support gems, because with support gems, we recently made a change so that you can only have one of each type on your character at the same time. And
Okay.
that one was an interesting path to get there, because initially when we made this change to the skill gem system so that everything would be a 6-link, if we had the skill gems designed from Path of Exile 1, what it would mean basically is that every skill would end up just being supported by exactly the same set of stuff, because you would just have like, increased melee damage on every melee skill you have, and this kind of thing. Like whatever's the best thing, you just put it on. You just put it on there. So what we tried to do was, we're like, okay, well, this is a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and think about support gem design to make it so that you're only incentivized to put one support gem on each on each skill. And we worked like that for a long time, and like we put a lot of effort into designing all of these skill support gems. And we did a lot of work, with like think about, okay, so you need interesting combo mechanics. It's like, okay, we want one thing which like makes it so that you do more freezing, but it also how does it even work? Oh right, so yeah, you've got something that like can remove freezing off a character and then deal like more damage, but then it also prevents the skill that it's on from freezing, and therefore you need another skill to do the freezing. Like we're thinking about all of these things like this, and like that was kind of cool, and it seemed like it might work. But then when we actually were doing playtesting more recently, we just found that like the support gems were just not compelling. Like you have this giant list of skill gems, and they're all kind of complicated, and like you didn't really have anything, like it just wasn't really working. It wasn't fun. No one was really enjoying it. And I don't remember who even suggested it, like just said, okay, well, if the goal is that you don't just use the same support gem on every single skill, what if we just literally limited you to have one of each support gem on your character? And as soon as we did that, it immediately opened up a huge amount of design space. Like just immediately overnight, every single support gem from Path of Exile 1 was immediately viable again. Like it's fine to have an increased melee damage gem if you can only put it on one of your skills, because like you're going to pick what skill is going to be the one you kind of want to be like your big sort of close-up damage dealer, and then the other skills then have different things that you want to do with them to support that in different ways. And effectively, it just opened up a huge amount of space. And so the space for what you can do in Path of Exile 2 for support gems is actually even larger than it was in PoE 1. We can be more crazy, because when you're only limited to one skill with each one, and because the comboing is so important, it means that like you can actually have the situation where like you can do more crazy things. So that change also just opened up a lot of design space. But it's interesting because the first reaction, and this is a funny one as well, the first reaction that people have when they hear that you can only have one support gem per skill is kind of like, I don't think I like that, like because it's like a limitation that's going to put in place. But in reality, what they don't see is all the design space it opened up that allowed us to have like a huge amount of things that's going on. So that's going to be an interesting one to just sort of sell to the players, as it were, because like the reality is that it gives us the ability to do lots of powerful things that you can now do, but it also kind of just seems like a limitation. So that's the kind of upside and downside of that one. But honestly, the change that it immediately made to the actual gameplay was like so much better than what we had before.
That's super interesting, because obviously, when you say you can only have one support gem per character, or like that one support gem is unique for you, I immediately go back to PoE 1, right? And think about like a meta build, and think about, okay, so I have like a few 2-offs, maybe like, yeah, I think it's mostly 2-offs, right? Maybe, right? So when you do that, you think immediately and say, well, I need like a vast amount of support gems to choose from, and PoE 1 has that, right? But there are so many gems, like over the years, obviously. I remember when everybody basically wanted like greater projectiles during beta and stuff, and it was the most, or like the best support gem by far for like from an outside perspective, because obviously you saw what the gem did. You were running a projectile skill, and you really wanted that gem, right? And other things were falling off. So and I totally agree with you when you are saying it will be interesting to see how we can sell this to the players, because it may, because especially if you wanna transition between, like, talking about weapon swapping, for example, you wanna move between those kind of like maybe sort of similar skills, right? But then you only have that one support gem, so you have to make a decision,
So
right?
there are a lot of ways, like, so the thing that it does result in. So one thing that I think I don't like in PoE 1 is that there's kind of been this thing where all the increase in damage that every support does is kind of gravitated to a single point, which means that just kind of erasing some of the interesting variety that you could have in that system. And once again, the reason for that is because you'll just put whatever the highest thing is on everything, if that's an option available to you. So with this system here, once again, we can it opens up more design space, right? Some things can be more powerful than others. You can have GMP and LMP both, and because they're separate, it means that you can choose one skill is going to be the one where I get this many projectiles, one skill is the one I have that many projectiles. But also things like fork and chain and all these other things have more. Is very interesting because, like, okay, you want at least one thing for each projectile skill that's going to kind of increase the well, not for every single skill, but for many skills that's going to increase like the number of targets you can hit. And it really makes you think, like, for each skill, well, what is actually the most effective way that I could do that for this skill as opposed to that one? You're like, there's sort of interesting things like that going on. So so long as we've got to make sure we've got enough options for increasing the thing you want to increase in some manner, ideally in some different way that you can sort of think about, then it means that there's always going to be enough stuff that you can do. But it does mean we have to have a large number of support gems, because obviously, you can have you can have quite a lot of skills actually when you come. I think like the actual maximum might end up being something like 11 supportable skills, maybe even 12 potentially by the time you got all the different ways you can get various extra things. And then all of them can have 5 supports in them. So that's a lot of support gems that you could potentially need. So we need a very large number of supports in total to be able to support the ability to still have choice while doing that. So that's quite a large job.
Is there like a ballpark number of, like, for release or early access you can decide that how many?
I honestly like we sort of said a number, I think, in a trailer at one point, and I don't remember what it was, but I think it'll end up being larger than that, because we'll need it to be now that we've got the system working the way that it is. But I honestly don't have an immediate thing. But what I will say is that we want to make sure that for every skill, and this is a lower bound, by the way, that we want to make sure there's at least 9 strong choices for each skill to do. You're picking 5 of the 9, and obviously in many skills there'll be like 50 choices, because there's things that just very general can work on many different attacks and so on, or they're doing some kind of enabling some kind of combo. But we want to make sure there's at least 9 for the skills that are hard to support, which can happen, right? There's certain skills that, like, there's just not a lot about them that is easy to kind of like come up with good ways. So long as we make sure there's at least 9 good choices for them, then I think we'll have enough to make sure that for everything in the game that there's a lot of good things.
It sounds very hard to balance the whole system. Sure. Yeah, this is fair. So maybe a little follow-up question: are there any plans to implement stat caps, so there's no opportunity to get over some stat like attack speed?
There are a few things that have caps, like from Path of Exile 1. So you would have seen, there's things like the block and obviously resists, which have their own stat to increase the cap and so on. There's a few things like that. But I don't think we're not going to we're not in the business of generally just locking things down. Like, we like to just let people kind of go with what they want to do as a general matter. Our caps are more along the lines of like, how many sources can you get of this thing? Like, you just have to be keeping control over, like, how many sources of attack speed are there. And a good tool for that is just thinking carefully about like what slots can it go on and so on, like how much is available in the tree, like all of these different things. But generally speaking, we like you to be able to kind of like max things, like to say like, okay, I'm just going to go all in the stat and not these other ones, rather than doing caps. So what I guess that is to say is that there's probably going to be a way to get your attack speed to stupid levels, but I would hope that if you do that, then that is going to be a bad build because
Yeah,
you're
it does.
sacrificing
Yeah.
so much damage
Yeah.
that
It's your
you're
fault.
not it just ends up not being useful. So yeah, that's kind of the most likely situation there.
Okay.
That's super interesting though that you are saying that basically builds who go all in on one offensive stat or one offensive affix will be bad eventually. So like basically does that, I mean, for attack speed I think it can be true because like you need damage modifiers basically to justify going all in on attack speed. And if you go in only on attack speed and have no damage, then you deal like way less damage compared to someone who has a nice balance, right?
Things like armor exist for this reason, like because they penalize small hits. So on some level, you need to get your hit beyond some kind of reasonable minimum before to get past the armor. So then that doesn't affect elemental damage, and there's like various things. But you know what I mean? Like there's always kind of little things we can use, like mechanics like that we can think about to try and basically make sure that it doesn't get too silly with regard to things like attack speed. But I mean, also another like complicated area. I'm not even going to talk really about this because I don't even have the context in my brain enough to remember everything about it. But like critical strikes are like a whole area where like there's a lot of very subtle balance you have to do to make it so that it isn't just best for everyone to just wall in on crit. It's like one of those things that can very easily get out of control. Like that's just another one of those areas like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had our fair share of in Diablo 4 that is of things you can focus on and you will always get rewarded compared to other offensive or offense stats like critical strike damage, as you were mentioning. And I mean that I think that as Jesse said, it's hard or maybe even impossible to balance all this kind of stuff, but yeah, I think looking back at PoE1, there might be a hope that things will be at least somewhat in place. Because when you are saying you want to have 9 choices available for every skill gem, and you have 11 skill gems that you can equip to the max, that is like 99 choices basically, but then you have like a big array of skill gems, and that not only those 11 we were talking about. So yeah, it's gonna be very exciting reading through patch notes when a majority of skill gems or support gems are getting changed, right? Sure. So I think Jesse, you wanted to see if there are some community questions left, right?
Yeah, if you have a few more minutes, we could go for some community questions. So chat, put it in. Maybe we will see what the community thinks or what the community wants and is interesting. So no leaks. Yeah, no something like that. So yeah, but then we will see. Please ask about traps and mines as a new weapon type. I don't know, traps and mines.
I mean, this has been known, right? That you've talked about this.
We haven't actually talked about it, I think, but the community probably vaguely knows about it because they've seen video of people playing, and there's been a base type of traps that drop. So this is actually the thing where we want to try and make sure that for each type of playstyle that there's some kind of weapon type that exists to support that playstyle. So what we've done is we've changed it so that traps and mines are a base type. What I will say is that this isn't fully realized really in the current version of the game because you don't have the other skills available, and we kind of haven't really talked about how it works or anything like that. But yeah, people have seen that there's a trap and mine base type, and just to get and as I said, the general overview is that like just how with minions we wanted to have a weapon type effectively for minions that can use to support them and that can roll interesting mods. We wanted to have a weapon type for traps that has mods that you can roll and do interesting things. So that's part of that effort is to make sure that we're doing that.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So maybe this go to the item selling part. Will there be a mechanic to protect players against instant sell out unintentionally cheap, like misclick on chaos instead of divine when setting up a price? So we talked before about this instant selling on the site. Is there a protection? So if I misclicked and it's very cheap and someone snack it?
I'm not really quite sure what kind of protection. I'd have to see a proposal basically for what that could be.
I was about to say the same because we had this issue in World of Warcraft for the longest time, right? You are putting in like a 1,000 gold item and it's it's 1 million instead, or like the other way around, right?
Mhm.
And this is like input error, but maybe something like extra dialogues, right, on the website. Are you really sure you
Right.
want to
The
sell this
problem with
for one
things
gold?
like that is people are so conditioned to just
Yeah,
skip past things like this that like they practically don't
of
even do
course.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yes, I don't really know. As I said, someone if someone has an idea for how we could make that better, then I'm happy to listen to it. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's like not too obvious to me what you can do for just someone who types the wrong number. And yeah, as I
Yeah.
said, the extra dialogue is just like very unlikely that someone will actually look at it. They just after you've done it 100 times, you just click yes every time without even paying attention.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that makes sense. I have a great question by Robbie Bubble 3107. Please ask about hideout designing and customizing and how they plan to implement that.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Sorry, there was someone asking about hideout
Oh,
designing
hideouts.
and
Right, sorry, I
customizing. Yeah,
misunderstood. Yeah.
sorry. Yeah,
Yeah, so we're still going to have the hideout system. We haven't really shown off what we're doing with it yet. So, but yeah, there'll be hideouts. And of course, all the hideouts from PoE1 that you have,
nice.
MTX hideouts that you purchased will transfer over and you'll be able to use them.
Cool. I have another one. Then Jesse can go with the next one. So trading is obviously a hot topic. Someone is asking if there will be a iOS or Android solution for the PoE trading for the console players, because obviously trading on console is always
Right.
a pain.
So, since you can use the website and to search, the most likely thing that I think will be the best user experience will be using your phone to search for items, like using, it's much easier to input text and so on and like search for specific things and so on. And then from that, since you can use the website, so we'll have to make it so that the trade website is more mobile friendly to support that use case.
Mhm.
Then once you you can initiate the system effectively from your phone and then finish on the console. So yeah, that's effectively how that would work. Yeah, like basically, so long as we can make the website mobile friendly, I think that experience should be pretty good.
That sounds promising. Yeah, Jesse,
That
next
sounds
one.
good. Oh yeah, I'm searching. So this
Okay.
should be a good one. I have the impressions that PoE2 will be more a casual game as a specialized game like PoE. So let's say it is PoE2 complicated, more complicated than PoE1, or would you say it's easier, especially for new players to jump in
Oh, sorry.
and try it
Right.
out?
So this is an interesting topic. So my feeling on this is that it is possible to have the best of both worlds. Like it is a lot less complicated to get into because of the way that we've changed the skill system and so on. But I think that the depth is still there. You still have all the choices that you previously had. One thing that is an interesting tactic around that is that we've changed a lot of how we present choices to players, especially around skills and supports. So effectively, like when you get these uncut skill gems, which you can then turn into the skill that you want, and the UI kind of shows you like, okay, it looks like a Diablo 2 style skill tree, right? Like here is a list of skills for you, right? But in reality, you could pick something from any other class. But the game is kind of like showing you like, okay, here's a panel just what looks like just for your class, and by presenting it that way, it kind of feels simple and like people think it's simple, but you can still pick something from any class. And in fact, a lot of the best things you could do are actually using cross-class synergies and doing other things like that. And we've done the same thing with the support gems as well, where when you open up the UI for support gems, it shows you at each tier 3 choices that you can make for this for the support. And we've picked out effectively 3 choices to recommend, but at the bottom of the screen there's this like all gems button, and that will let you just see every support that could possibly work with the skill. And so all of the choices are still there. Like it's just that we've effectively made the UI look like, oh, here's 3 choices you could have to upgrade the skill that we've hard coded for you, right? The reality is that the system is still open just like before, but if you're a new user and you don't understand that, it appears very simple. So I think that is a good philosophy that we have through the game of like make it appear simple to start with, and then you read some build guide later on that tells you, oh, you can do this, this kind of stuff, and then you realize the true depth. And of course, for the people who just like to come up with things, all of that stuff is still there. And even in the most recent the console event that we just had, It was very interesting. So, because I talked to a lot of people after the event about what they did and what classes and skills they were using and so on, and you definitely get that kind of 20% who realize immediately, oh, we can pick things across classes, and I started experimenting, and they started telling me about the crazy stuff that they were doing, where they were combining skills from different classes. So it's interesting to see. That isn't for everyone. Like some people want that kind of more railroad experience of like here are things that are just going to work and are easy that I can pick. And but we want to make sure that for the people who don't like that, and I think for the longevity of the game as well, it's important to have all of the depth that we previously had. So the thing that's like the most not like this in PoE 2 right now is the skill tree, where you still have that moment of you open it up and you get the giant thing of like a million choices, and you're like, okay, this is crazy. But I actually think that the skill tree, while it has the biggest reputation for being the complicated thing in Path of Exile 1, because it's very easy to show someone and be like, hey, this thing is huge and like obviously crazy.
Right.
I don't actually think it is the biggest source of like complexity in the game. I think it really is to do with the skills and like the way that the sockets are in items, and to do with just like many other mechanics and so on that we have. So yeah, like that one, you get to still have the moment that everyone gets if they open it up and go, oh my god, this is ridiculous, while actually that not even being the main source of the complexity that we have. So as I said, my hope is to split the difference. Well, not even split it. My hope is to get the best of both worlds, to get both the depth that we want, as well as the new player friendliness of having things feel like a few simple choices.
So I have actually a follow-up question about that, because I think that this like best of both worlds aspect is quite interesting. And you were, it sounds very, and I heard this in other interviews as well, that you and the team, you are very firm on your illusion that the skill tree is in theory very looks convoluted and big and whatnot, and people like from the Xbox showcase, even there was like this interviewer who saw the tree for the first time, and his face fell off, right? So and I remember showing it to my wife and explained to her how it looks like the Final Fantasy X tree, and that this captured my interest way back in the beta days and whatnot. But were you ever at that point where you were thinking during PoE 2 progression in terms of development to scrap it and go for something completely different, or were you always pretty sure about what you just said, that it's only like one point at a time? Yes, it looks big, but you have only one choice in that regard, and you have one choices multiple times.
I have always been pretty sure about it. Even it's funny because the time when we were most likely to have changed this was actually right before Path of Exile 1 released. There was actually this before the game came. Actually, okay, like, can we actually like have this thing where you see this whole this giant like potentially overly complicated thing when you start the game, and we discussed all kinds of solutions that we could have all the way back then. About like do you like hide parts of it initially, do you and then we're like, no, we shouldn't do that because people just look it up anyway, like what's the point? Should we have it so that you unlock parts of the skill tree by doing certain actions in the world, like so that it kind of expands over time? Like we talked about all these things, but at the end of the day we just kind of didn't really like any of them as much as what we had. And it did come up again of like, should we consider redoing this? But like honestly, for like a very short amount of time, because like really we just couldn't think of anything that we liked as much. And it's also so iconic, I think, that it would at some point not even feel like Path of Exile anymore if we started changing something like that.
That's fair.
So that's come up a lot actually, because one thing that I was feeling very hesitant to change because of iconicness recently was the fact that the support sockets were colored. We had colored sockets until very recently, and then at some point we realized that this limitation was just kind of pointless and just getting in the way. But I was like, but colored sockets is like such a PoE thing, I don't really want to get rid of that. But in the end, we decided that, and I was worried about that one because I thought the reaction from the community might be negative about it as well. But then it happened. We had the console event recently, and no one really even talked about it. Like it just kind of wasn't really a big deal. So it's kind of funny how that was. But I certainly think that changing the skill tree would be not like that. I think that changing the skill tree would be something that would very much make people very unhappy. So yeah, even just for that reason alone, I think we wouldn't want to change what we're doing there.
Right, especially after announcing that it's going to be like a standalone game, and that PoE 1 will still exist, absolutely. Right? You want to have things that the games have in common. So things that talking about things that both games may not have be in common is someone is asking, will you be able to dual wield a sword and a wand in PoE 2?
This was the the exact same question I want to ask.
Yeah.
So actually, the answer is no. We talked about this for a long time. This one was actually a huge discussion and pretty divisive initially when we were talking about it, because it is one of those freedoms you have in Path of Exile 1. And I think the thing we came up with in the end with it was that there really aren't, like, trying to make reasons why that can be a good thing to do was very, very hard. And if you've got, like, every time you add a stance like that, it's a bunch of animation work. So supporting every single combination of weapons like that is like a whole bunch of animation work that limits our ability to create more skills, because, you know, when you have to make more animations for each skill, it just like means that there's more work. You know, we can create less of them effectively because there's more work that has to go into each individual one. And so then we sort of asked ourselves, what are we really getting out of this that we aren't getting out of the weapon swap system that we now have, right? If you want to do a hybrid sword wand build, I want you to be able to do that. But the way you should be doing that is by having two weapon sets where you've got sword on one and wand on the other. And that is a much more effective thing that is going to not create extra animation work, but also be much more balance effective for you because of the way the weapon specialization system works, where you get different passives on each weapon set. So you can specialize for your wand on one for your wand attacks, and you can specialize for your sword on your other ones. And if you that opens up the capability of a build like that actually being potentially good, rather than just kind of like a weird thing to do. And so I hope that will mean that, like, you still get all of the same happiness that you would have gotten out of designing a build like that, while actually having better balanced support for you and not requiring a bunch of extra animation work in order to support it. So that's the good thing there.
I mean that's obviously fair, like from a pure developer standpoint, or not, maybe not even a developer standpoint, but like common sense, right? But I think the question is targeting like immersion and fantasy, basically. Right. And you were talking about the weapon swap. So when I heard this first, or when I saw this first, when I think it was when Neon was playing the monk, right? And was I think that was the one where it came to my fantasy, because I was always like this kind of monk friar kind of guy that played with staves and whatnot. But I also wanted to be like some sort of spellcaster or cleric in the back, and when I need, I want to put out my offhand and like my little maul or something like that. I don't know. Is the weapon swap system that kind of thing that basically enlarges immersion on a per class base, or is it more of a gameplay tool? Like, was this like initially a solution to a gameplay issue, or was it like from a fantasy point of view, like, oh man, it would be really cool to do weapon swaps? So is that just a side effect?
So the thing, where it came from was the discussion of, okay, people want to be able to do this. What's a way that we can make this a viable choice? What's a way we can make the balance support the fantasy that you have? Like, you want to be a character that can use axes and swords or whatever, you know, like whatever it is, you want to be able to do that stuff. The balance in PoE 1 kind of just meant that, like, it wasn't really a thing even as much as you wanted to. How can we change the balance to allow it? And so we talked about a lot of options. Like, there was a ton of design ideas, and and eventually the weapon swap thing was what we came to allow it. But I think that it is feeling very cool, like, because you can see the weapons on your back as well when you're not swapped into them, and like there's a little animation of switching that's like very short and things like that. Like, it just has a cool feel. I think when you do it. And because it's also automatic when you go to use a skill, it is very fluid as well. So it isn't like the clunkiness that you had in PoE 1 with weapon swap, where effectively nobody used it because it was too hard to use. It is actually something that is a bit more conceptually difficult because of the way that you've got the whole like passive trees stat swapping thing.
It is, yeah.
But what you do get is like actual balance support for playing heterogeneous builds, weapon type builds. And of course, the fantasy of like I can be a spellcaster and a weapon user at the same time, and I don't have any balance downsides for that, and like I can actually consider comboing things, and it opens up a lot of design space for for what you can do there as well. So ideally it kind of like mixes both of these things in a good way.
Right. Yeah. Best of both worlds. Okay. Yeah. I have another question. It's a very long question, so I will try to condense it. So someone is saying that group play in PoE 1 with very different builds and builds that do very different things. Like this person is talking about life leeching, life on kill, etc. Sometimes certain builds don't interact well with each other. So basically, what the standard group play was that you had an aura bot and then like damage dealers, quote unquote. Is that something you want to change with PoE2? Do you want to, like, besides all the other issues around group play, like graphical stuff and whatnot, do you have particular design choices in mind to incentivize group play, for example, like increased loot? Okay, I had not said that out loud, but is there something more behind group play?
So the intention with group play is, as far as rewards go, is that you effectively get the same experience with regard to like how much stuff of value that you are finding on your character. Now, the way we achieve that is by I've actually explained this one before, but effectively we've got a different way we're achieving that in PoE2 than we did in PoE1. But ultimately, you're going to get double currency if you've got two players, so that both players get enough currency and so on and so forth, and various other tweaks to various classes. But what I will say is that in Path of Exile 2, because we've got all this sort of comboing stuff going on with skills, there's a lot more capability for classes to have synergy with each other. There are skills that just a really simple example is like, the monk can place down the bell, and then the other character, if they've got a really fast attack speed, can like if you're a mercenary or something, you can like shoot that with rapid shot, and it'll just go ding 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 ding, and then destroy everything. Like, you got this kind of stuff, but also like some people applying status ailments that the other one consumes and so on. There's a lot more interaction with that. Now, along with that, of course, can come the situation where that you can get sometimes in Path of Exile 1, where it's like, if you're both playing a burning build, then if you because you can only be one stack of burning on a monster, effectively that is not a very good like combination to use. Like, there are cases where you've got like characters that just don't have have sort of anti-synergy with each other. But you have a lot more skills, and you're expected that your builds do more things. So ideally, you can still find and ideally, if you're playing a burning build, what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to have something that utilizes the burning to do something else, right? Like, part of your build is you apply burning and doing damage that way, but then you've got some other thing where it's like, okay, now I use the burning to do some other thing. Like, there's some other part of the build. And so if both people are doing this, then ideally you can have a situation where one player can be applying the burning and then the other player is like doing something to take advantage of it. And so you're still getting some kind of synergy there where you're able to do both parts of you're still able to have a good time together. As I said, because all the design of all of our skills is about like, you need to be using six different skills or something to be really effective. You're just going to have a situation where in a party, there's still other parts of your build that are going to work correctly, and ideally even more synergy that you can get from, as I said before, like, using things that are actually cross-class. So, I guess what I would say is, I think it should be a better situation, but it's honestly, it can be hard to tell until everyone plays. But even just from the console playtest we did, which was co-op, we had a lot of good stuff about people talking about interesting ways that they played together. I think Darth Microtransaction was playing like two monks, which like both the same class, which should be a situation where it should be the worst as far as this goes, right? Because they're both potentially doing the same thing, and they still seem to have a good time. So I think it seemed to be working. There's enough skill variety you can do, like things can still work. So I believe it is a thing that is working well. But I guess we'll see how we go when we have more players playing as well.
Okay.
We'll see. So maybe I will throw something in. Will be solo self-found in PoE2, the game mode?
Yep, we'll have it. It'll still be there.
And also hardcore.
Yeah.
So hardcore would be a very good experience for the first time.
I think that you would have a lot of trouble if you played hardcore the first time. Bosses are a lot more dangerous, and also, you're expected to die more. But then on the other hand, we have lots of checkpoints and no death penalty, right? So I would hope that each boss kills you at least once before before you sort of learn its mechanics. But then on the other hand, I think that it would be trivial for me to get to halfway through Act 2 right now in hardcore without dying. Now that I know myself, now that I know all the boss mechanics, because the bosses are so you can learn them, you can dodge them all. Hardcore is absolutely viable once you know the game well. Now, of course, you can always just build ultra tank and very low DPS and do that whole thing, and just be very safe, and you should be okay. But yeah.
Will these like similar to PoE1? Will these campaign bosses be map bosses eventually, or are
Yeah.
you?
Yep. they will.
Okay. Okay. So
generally
okay.
speaking, the balance changes from. I mean, obviously the balance just goes, in terms of damage and everything goes up. But like even things like, like specific skills, the frequency they get used, the like, or just like, there's just a lot of things about the abilities we can amp up during map gameplay that make it so that the map version can be harder. But yeah, all of those bosses will absolutely be in maps.
Okay, perfect. So maybe another one. Will there be pets in PoE2?
Sorry, what?
Will there be pets? So
Oh,
following
pets.
pets like
I
in
mean,
PoE1.
you'll have the same, I mean, it's the same microtransactions that are available, right? So all the pets, like the
And will they
microtransactions.
do something? So maybe
Well,
collecting gold and
so they can't have any gameplay advantage for the microtransaction ones because they're,
yeah,
they're,
sure.
that would be obviously pay to win.
Okay, so they're
You wouldn't do
just
that. Yeah,
cosmetic.
they're just. I mean, the thing is, we try to do interesting things with them. I don't know if you've like seen too much about the microtransactions we do recently, but like often we'll kind of have some kind of like gameplay design to them that doesn't actually physically do something.
Okay.
So, I mean, okay, this is probably like a terrible example, just one that sprang to my mind. We had this like little like robot-y thing that kind of follows you around, and then when you use a flask, it like looks like it's healing you. Now the reality is that like using the flask is what's actually healing you, but like it thematically looks like it's this like robot thing that sends like a little healing laser at you when you use it. Like it isn't really gameplay because like as I said, it's just a it's just a cosmetic effect that happens on something you already are doing. But we try to have all our microtransactions kind of have some kind of like thing where gameplay triggers them, or they're game systems kind of interact with them, but they don't actually affect the gameplay simulation in any regard.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think there's one. Maybe that's the last community question then, because we are running out of time. Are there any mechanics in campaign mode that encourage veteran players to explore more and kill more monsters rather than beeline for the exit?
So one kind of important element is that the first time you kill a unique, it has a lot more drops. It's the first time on each character, I should say. And so that means that there is a lot of incentive to like kill uniques that you would otherwise might skip. The other thing as well is there's a lot of hard-coded drops. Now, a lot of the servers are part of a catch-up mechanic to make sure that if you don't get something, and a lot of this is around like skills and things like this. Like, there's a lot of like those things that are from specific bosses and specific places. So if you're a veteran player and you didn't get a certain drop, you will probably know which monster you can kill to get that thing to kind of make up for the fact that you didn't get it randomly. And so this kind of thing can also be something where it's like depending on each run, depending on what you found, you might want to like target specific things to like get specific items that you need. It will be quite interesting to see around racing what the optimal strategy turns out to be for what things to kill and what not to kill. I have no idea how that will end up, but yeah, there should be, I hope, some incentive to kill a lot of these things. And what I've generally found myself, having played through now many times, especially through Act 1, which I've gone, you have to get through every time I want to go to the higher areas, is that if I'm trying to play fast as possible, if I run into like a boss, I will kill it because just about every time, because the rewards are definitely worth it. If I didn't run into it, I might seek it out if I'm feeling like I'm lacking something, but I probably will just not if I didn't happen to run into it. Since the levels are random, it's like, and there's quite a lot of different things you can find in each area as well. We try to sort of have like 2 to 3 like interesting things in each area that can kind of be found and can give you some kind of reward. Like just depending on what I run into, that will sort of change what I'm doing in that run. So yeah, I think we should hit a sort of pretty good balance there. But I guess we'll always find out and can tweak things afterwards.
Okay. Sounds really good. I think we finish, huh?
Yeah.
Do you have another question?
No, I'm fine. Thank you so much for answering community questions as well.
Yeah.
No problem.
yeah, I think we got a pretty nice view at what's coming. Do you have anything to announce regarding when we will see you next in any official capacity?
Unsure at this point. I mean, I'll definitely be at Gamescom, as I said before. There's probably going to be something before that point, but I guess we'll see. Honestly, like a lot of stuff recently was just getting to that console event and also some of the internal alphas we've been doing. So now I need to take stock again and look at like, okay, what's my next immediate objective, and think about.
Gamescom is fine. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesse will be there most likely. I will be there most likely. So that's the most important thing, that we can play a Path of Exile 2 as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.